a healthy handful of drops yesterday offensively, which you're going to see happen. I saw a couple of people, we posted videos. I posted a lot of Will Levis content on Twitter yesterday. And JT, let's go ahead and pull up that video. I was playing around with some slow-mo on my iPhone with some Will Levis video yesterday, looking at mechanics, looking at spiral and footwork, and just trying to get a better feel for how quick that releases, which is lightning quick. But we had a handful of drops, and that's not to be unexpected. During the offseason, I had some folks commenting like, well, I saw a lot of drops today. Yeah, you're going to have some days like that, man. The key is don't stack them. And if it becomes like, hey, once a week during the offseason, guys are dropping the ball like crazy, then it becomes a thing. But one day in May where people just have lazy hands or derpy hands, like whatever, I'll ask the receivers why sometimes you just drop the ball. Maybe it's a focus thing. That's not really super that concerning to me. I am doing a great job of having all of my notes pulled up ahead of time for the show. So allow me to vamp for 1 second while I go and find the list of people that were not at yesterday's, again, voluntary OTAs. We were missing out on DeAndre Hopkins, Colton Dowell, NWI, L'Jarius Sneed, Kenneth Murray, Harold Landry, Jalen Duncan, NPF, Tavondre Sweat, TK McClendon, and Jeffrey Simmons. Now, a handful of those guys, just veterans you expect to miss some time. DeAndre Hopkins, everybody losing their mind over that. He's at or near the top of the list of guys that I don't really care if he's here or not right now. He also did a panel with the On3 event that's going on downtown. So like now Will Levis also did that panel and he was at practice, but I don't really care what he's up. It's voluntary. These are voluntary OTAs. The players negotiated for them to be voluntary in the last CBA agreement because they asked the owners for more money and the owners said no. So this is what they got. And if they're taking advantage of it, I don't really care. Now, if you're Jaquan Jackson, if you're, Kyle Phillips even, and you're missing out on these practices where like you've got something to prove and you need to take every advantage, then I might be like, well, I don't know what you're doing exactly, but I'm going to side with the union guys on this one and say, if you want to take advantage of the voluntary period, take advantage of the voluntary period. Now,
yeah, I was going to say it was also pretty interesting to, we've talked about, there's been some rumblings about OTAs altogether just not being a thing anymore. That was a big topic of contention that we probably really won't talk about today, but it was asked, as a lot of the players either had just faintly heard about it or other guys who were like, is that actually happening? Like, I know someone asked Lloyd Cushenberry and he's like, oh, is that happening? And then they're like, no. But like, it is an interesting idea that we could eventually just not have OTAs right now and have them later, right?
Well, I better say they'd be shifting them to basically have the ramp up begin earlier in July. And then I kind of hate that idea from a media standpoint. Obviously, it's not about us, but if we like, you'll as you cover training camp more hands-on this year, you will realize here in a couple of months just how by the end of training, the last 2 weeks of training camp, it's like, I don't know what to talk about. This is a slog. Can we please, God, please get to the actual games? If we made that longer, it would be really tough to keep people engaged. It helps to have a little taste of the offseason here in May and June, and then we take a break, and then we start it back up in August, and we put the pads on. That's what I think it should stay. And I don't know. It sounds like it's in the fledgling process of becoming a potential thing the NFL considers, NFLPA considers. So we'll cover that more if it becomes more of a thing down the road. Kenneth asking in the comments, was it mostly on the receivers? He's asking about the drops. I saw a lot of high balls from Levis clips. I saw this kind of narrative in the comments on Twitter yesterday that like, there's a lot of ball. Why is the ball sore on Levis? I don't know, JT, maybe you disagree. First of all, every drop I can remember yesterday hit the receiver in both their hands. So definitely on the receivers. I have a handful of clips on my phone that I posted where it's like, it hit Tyler Boyd in the chest and it just bounced off him. So no, the answer is I don't think the drops were on Will Levis. And then as for him soaring balls, like I didn't notice that really as a problem at all yesterday. I went back when I saw people saying that, I went back through every clip I had on my phone and I started counting like, yeah, that was high. That was off the mark. Good off the, and it was like, I mean, I feel like I have like 20 to 30 clips of him throwing yesterday. And that's kind of all I was doing yesterday was focusing on him during the open period and filming him. And I counted like 3 or 4 balls that were kind of high, but catchable. So no, but if he was, and this is the transition here, if he was not quite on the mark yesterday, and maybe I should have asked, we didn't get to speak to him yesterday, but if we did, I would have asked him whether or not that was the case. He may have said yes, and I would imagine the reasoning behind that would be, we heard from Brian Callahan at the podium, and we don't have a clip of that today, but he was talking about how they're kind of working on his mechanics, working on the arm placement as he comes following through the level of his elbow. And I have to, I'm not a passing expert. I am not a QB coach. We leave that to our buddy Sean McAvoy here on the show. But from what I understand, it is about elbow being tighter to the body and the follow through and the footwork, just the general mechanics of his throw. They are tweaking some things on that front. And I noticed it looked kind of funny, or not funny, but different, just looking at the way he throws. Some other beat writers, I was talking to Terry McCormick yesterday, he noticed it as well. And then we asked Brian Callahan, and he said, yes, we are working on those things. So wouldn't be surprised if there's some wrinkles to be ironed out on that front as he's trying to change some things. But I'm sure the idea is for it to be for the better, right? So anything else on Levis? We got 2 clips. Let's show on Levis now that we've shown plenty of slow-mo footage here for you on the YouTube channel. Let's play first this clip from Tyjae Spears. Spoke to him yesterday. By the way, total side note, a lot of drops yesterday on the Titans practice field. You know who didn't drop the football? This guy, because I was watching Tyjae alone, and he noticed me, and I was on my phone, and then he just said, he screamed, hands, and threw the ball at me. You think you have good hands. Then an NFL player throws the ball at a football at you and screams hands. Didn't see how confident you are. I caught the ball and then I threw back a perfect spiral to him, actually. So I'm on the team now. I was speaking to the coach earlier today. We're working on the contract and everything, but that was something that happened yesterday. I did not drop the ball. Many other professional NFL players did drop the ball. Do with that information what you will. However, Tyjae was asked yesterday after him and I were playing catch on an NFL practice field, hey, Will Levis, year 2, what do you make of his growth? What do you make of him as a leader stepping into a bigger role, the clear bona fide starter role? And here's what he had to say.
You can see the confidence, you can see like the work that you can see the not so last year, like not the early on leadership. He didn't have that because he wasn't a starting guy, but now you can see the early on leadership. Like every chance he get, he like break the huddle down and he leads us and like he reloads things. He ain't just gonna let anything happen. So you can see all those things early on.
And then we spoke to Brian Callahan. I asked him about the interview he did. And JT, I think you read it. I'd imagine many of our listeners read it. It was an interview with Albert Breer on SI earlier this week. And he was Brian was walking Albert through some footage of Will in his office. I think Albert came down here to do this interview, and they were talking about some of the things that sold Brian Callahan on joining the Titans, on becoming a part of the Will Levis experiment. And he was showing him a clip from the Falcons game, Will's first start, that was an example, or maybe the example for Brian in terms of, this is what sold me on. I want to come coach this guy. I think he's got phenomenal talent. And the gist of the throw was bad decision, incredible throw, incredible arm talent, incredible accuracy. And that's the kind of thing where Brian, in the piece, and I recommend you read it, he said, I can coach up the decision making. If you've got that toolbox at your disposal, we can work with that. And so I asked Brian, okay, so what does that look like in this offseason process as you're trying to coach up Will Levis on becoming a better decision maker? You're trying to get him to improve between the ears because he's got physically what you want from him. What does that look like? And here's what he said.
Asking him on a per play basis. What is this progression ask? What is he supposed to do with his footwork? Where are his eyes supposed to be? We're teaching the system first, and then as you get into situations like today being a third down day, you get the chance to look back and say, well, hey, this was a 3rd and 4 decision. Could you have made a different one? Could the ball gotten out quicker? We don't need to hold on to it in this particular instance. So there's a lot of coaching of the situations that go within teaching of the system. And so where we're at in our process now is more about teaching the system and what's expected, and then you add the situational layers as you get more comfortable with the install. So we're about done with the installation part of the offense, and now it becomes more of a memory and recall and starting to pair a lot more things together. So it's coming together at this point, and then by training camp, we should be ready to roll, and guys should know what to do and how to do it.
And that's the thing that I find most fascinating. Obviously, his point that right now we're focused on the install, making sure he knows this offense inside and out like the back of his hand. Then in the July, August portion of the offseason, that's when we're going to focus on the situational ball, making sure he is mentally put through the rigors of as many different possibilities as they can fit into the time frame that they have, because with experience, with reps comes knowledge, comes power. I found that answer interesting, and I think that's a narrative, that's a storyline I'm going to continue to kind of harp on. I want us to continue to harp on later on in the summer, because if that's the primary goal, and man, the difference between Will Levis having this whole offseason to be the guy and them tailor the classroom and the practice field to what best benefits him, as opposed to last year where he's fighting for second string reps, that's a massive change.
I agree. And I think with that comes hand in hand this new system that Brian Callahan's bringing in. I feel like a lot of the time last year when Will Levis was in the game, you can go back to like even that Jacksonville game, right? The Tim Kelly system in that game specifically really only worked when there were design plays that Will Levis understood in that playbook. And it was, I remember talking about that.
It was a training wheel offense.
It was. And I remember thinking about that game where it's like in this system, Will Levis only thrived when he knew what he was truly doing, because that's really the only experience that he got. Now putting him in this Brian Callahan system, like you said, as the guy, and not only as the guy, but also, in a Brian Callahan system that has been more receiver to quarterback friendly, making more design plays where that this guy, things are going to work out in your favor most of the time, is something that I think Will Levis can build some confidence on. And then with that confidence comes more of the decision-making ability that hopefully leads us to less of those, throws where they're in the defenseman's hands.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Thanks for that.
Want more of the latest from the Hot Read podcast? Subscribe to the channel right below.
And follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram @HotReadPod for even more segments, clips, and announcements.